We're delighted that our first speaker tonight is Steve Gower. Steve is an activist with Insulate Britain, who have been for the last sort of 6 months or so the forefront of the campaign for insulation and green housing, and really trying to link together issues like fuel poverty with climate change and the need for urgent action now. So without further ado, I'll pass it to him to take it away. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you all as well. My name's Steve Gower. I'm a father. I live in Gloucester. I'm an advocate for the homeless, and I'm a member of Insulate Britain. The reason I joined Insulate Britain was because through my activism as a member of Unite Community in Gloucestershire and an advocate for the homeless in Gloucestershire, on a number of occasions I've visited the council, I've met my MP, I've wrote to the Houses of Parliament, and nothing's changed. And when I was told about a meeting that was in my local town, where Roger Hallam was doing starting of a new campaign called Insulate Britain, for me it seemed like a no-brainer. I put the two together with the environment issue that we all know about and the injustices we see with fuel and fuel poverty. I joined straight away from day one, which was in the first block was in September, right up to the end when we done our final block at Parliament Square in December. And I've been to the High Court for my troubles, along with many others, twice. And I currently got, I think it's 7 at the moment, 7 further court cases now in April for my endeavour, and 150 odd other people, 170, I apologise, 170 odd other people. I live in fuel poverty. I did then and I do now. I had an option in, I think it was about September time, where I could either go to the job centre and be told that I'd be better off with £20 or less in my universal credit payments, or I could sit on the M25 and say, stuff you. I chose the latter, and lo and behold, just before I got to the High Court, I was sanctioned. What can I say? I couldn't even afford the fuel I was putting in for the energy I was using in my flat. It's only a 1-bedroom flat, but it's made in the 1800s. It was for GWR offices. So even in the 1800s, they realized it was only fit as an office and a workplace. Yet 200 years later, they're housing people in there like myself. It's cold in the winter and warm in the summer, and too warm in the summer. Do I regret my actions? No, I don't. Do I think more needs to be done? Yes, I do. And hence, there's another campaign coming up pretty soon, Just Stop Oil. I think I've done enough activism at the moment, but I'm certainly advocating for it and for those who want to participate, which is a lot more than there was with Insulate Britain, believe me. So it's going to be quite big, very big. That, along with XR, with their campaigns as well, it's going to be interesting these next couple of months. I think that's it at the moment. I advise anybody not to be scared when you do these campaigns. We're looking for people who can take the next step. And it doesn't matter if you're middle-aged like me or a lot younger, like I can see Harry. I've never met him before, but he looks a lot younger than me. And it is that I was on the campaign with people in their 80s. All right. It doesn't matter how old you are. I understand that some people have got commitments and assets and what have you. I'm lucky in a way. As an advocate, I'm a volunteer advocate, and I'm an independent one. And the reason I'm independent is because I'm unemployed, which means I'm not bound by any rules. And I think once you've retired, you get that freedom. It's a freedom that you don't see in whilst you're in, between your 20 and 50 and 60. So yeah, I would advise anybody, if you feel that you do, that there is an issue that needs addressing, that isn't just, then go for it. It's never too late. And I'm open for any questions you wish to ask regarding the Insulate Britain campaign, which was quite different. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you so much, Steve. That's just is so inspiring. I'm gonna, abusing my role as chair, I'm also gonna do a quick sort of shout out about some of the organising that I'm involved in as someone involved in tenants unionism, and why that's related to the climate struggle, and then we'll open it up for questions. So let me just share these slides again. There's an important thing to remember in the context here, which is that in the last 10 years, there's been a massive rise in housing community unions in the UK. So community membership was launched for Unite in 2011. It's not a housing union per se, but increasingly does take on advocacy work for people who are facing housing issues. Acorn and Living Rent both started in 2014 and have branches across England, Wales and Scotland. And then the London Renters Union started in 2017. And then in 2020, we've just had Catchu starting in Ireland and the Greater Manchester Tenants Union also starting. So this is not new tactics. These aren't new protest tactics. This isn't a massive innovation. This is something that folks worried about poverty and working class people in the 1920s, 1930s were doing. What's happened is it's not been done on the same scale and level for many decades now here in Britain, and it is starting. And recently, these groups have got involved in climate mobilizations, right? So Acorn and Living Rent actually put out a program of demands for COP26 relating to the need to retrofit and insulate housing, but also make sure that that housing isn't then going to be used to gentrify and kick out working class people, to prevent landlords from profiting from grants whilst they're also profiting from exploitation of working class tenants. And in addition to this, Acorn, London Renters Union, Living Rent, we're all out at Glasgow, we're all out at local COP26 demos across Britain during that period. But you've also seen on a more local level, many of these housing unions are actually starting to do just local environmental and climate campaigning as well. I've put down here in the bottom right, Stop the Sobertown Tunnel, which is a big campaign here in East London. Now the local branch of London Renters Union in Newham and Leytonstone attended recently that big demo to show their support for the need to reduce air pollution, to get cleaner streets for everyone, to actually do something about this monumental world crisis. And at the same time, Acorn have campaigned in Oxford on installing insulation into homes and the need for the council to actually invest money in that, shockingly, like you'd imagine they actually should be doing, right? But this is a reflection that not only over the last 10 years have we suddenly got all these tenants unions, they're increasingly concerned about climate change. And that's because increasing renter power is a form of climate organising. Flash and long-term flooding impacts working class renters more, right? You're more likely to be on a floodplain closer to a river. Same it does with heat and poor ventilation. If you're a working class renter, you're more and more likely to not have heating when cold snaps hit in winter, as we've seen by the dual poverty disaster going on in the UK. You're also more likely to live in poorly ventilated homes, so it means that when it does get overheated in summer, you're dealing with poor quality air or having to pay extra electricity for air conditioning, so you just get trapped in this sort of poor quality housing. When there is damage to do with a weather event, you're waiting for the landlord to repair it. So what you need is some sort of body of collective action in your community that can show up at the landlord's house and say, this isn't good enough. And that, as we hope in a few years, a few decades, can actually drive sort of predatory landlords and landlordism in general out of this country. And this is all related to this point that green housing, without understanding how homes are owned, is a disaster. So it's really important that we're retrofitting, but retrofitting grants don't work if people are only using houses as buy-to-let properties. They're not thinking, how do I make this house warm for me? They're thinking, how can I minimum spend on this house to get as much rent from residents? So no matter how many government grants they make, it doesn't like impact that sort of incentive. And every time the government's created sort of grant systems for installing insulation, installing heat pumps, what we've seen is in the centre of cities where they're mainly buy-to-let properties, there's no taker, because what incentive is there for a house you don't even live in, right? And at the same time, what we don't want is, if there is this big push for like massive government spending on insulation, which there bloody needs to be, it also shouldn't go and line the pockets of folks that have been emptying our pockets for months, right? It should be fundamentally about who's actually living in the housing, and actually having it sort of a houses for all, good housing for all should be central to this sort of policy. And I defer to something that was recently said in our recent pamphlet on capitalism and climate change about housing unions on this. Whilst initially fighting landlords and councils for repairs, deposits and against evictions doesn't seem like climate organising, the truth quickly reveals itself. A strong and embedded tenants union has the power to quickly win repairs, compensation in response to weather events, and to fight for changes in housing which reduce emissions, cut fuel bills, and protect tenants from such climate impacts.